It's the final stretch, the last two rounds that will determine the outcome of one of the most coveted titles in all of South African motorsport. It's a title that has been won by some of the biggest names in South Africa. Legends like Renergen, Hannes Grobler, and in more recent times, champions like Anthony Taylor, Chris Visser, Leroy Poulter, and Dakar legend Janelle de Villiers. For 2023, a number of hopefuls will once again be fighting for glory, and they now only have 2 races left to influence the outcome. All the action from the Renergen 400, the penultimate round of the 2023 South African Rally Raid Championship, is brought to you by Ford, Toyota and Pirelli. Rounds 4 and 5 were in the town of Parys, the one in the Free State that is, and for round 6 we travel even further into the Free State flatlands. This one took place in the mining metropolis of Welkom. The former home of events such as the South African MotoGP played host to the penultimate race on the 2023 calendar. The venue is, of course, the Phakisa Freeway. And for 2023, this new race also had a new title sponsor in the form of Renergen. The company's name should be familiar to SARRC fans, as it also appears on the Toyota Hilux of Series stalwart Gary Berthold, who was happy to explain the connection.
Fantastic to see all the guest houses full, petrol stations pumping extra fuel, lots of spectators coming out. Really nice from a CSI that we've created quite a few jobs in bringing Renergen to this part of the world. So that was the whole process behind it.
Phakisa has been the home of motorsport in the Free State for many years. Although this was a first visit to the racing facility by the SA Rally Raid Championship, Machabeng Municipality Executive Mayor Tondukolo David Kalipa was pleased to welcome the series to the Free State.
This is what we want in Machabeng. Want more of this event. We initiated this event with business. We agreed that we must host this event annual in Machabeng because we want to revive Phakisa.
A number of new innovations for the Renergen 400, but it didn't stop there. For this race, the organizers adopted a new format. The race distance of 400 kilometers would be split into more segments than usual. The Friday would consist of a short Pirelli qualifying, but the Friday would also see a short racing loop that covered in excess of 30 kilometers. The remaining race distance was split into 2 identical loops on the Saturday. So plenty of opportunities to try and win the race, but in the same breath, also plenty of opportunities to lose it. It has become the norm to start the action with a good look at the cars and crews competing in Class T1. There are several cars from various manufacturers and a number of fast drivers in this class, but the season has developed into a two-way fight between defending class champion Eben Besson and challenger Johan de Bruyn. These were the standings after round 5. It shows the name of Besson topping the points ladder on 136 points, but de Bruyn was only 4 points back and well within striking distance. We spoke with Besson shortly before the start of the race.
It's only 4 points. We have a close championship, but I think we're ready for it.
But de Bruyn and Besson weren't the only 2 competitors in Class T1. No less than 6 cars took the starters' orders on the Friday morning of the event. The Pirelli qualifying race was a short and fast affair, making use of the Phakisa Freeway racetrack, as well as the surrounding dirt roads. This provided quite a spectacle for the spectators and a unique and different challenge for the crews. And what a great sight to see the Renault Dust of Johan and Sean van Staden back in action after a crash that nearly destroyed the car during the previous race. The crew worked hard to get it back together, and they were rewarded with the 4th fastest time in qualifying. We were nearing the sharp end of the Class T1 battle between de Bruyn and Besson, with the visiting Dutch driver Rinst Hofstra also thrown into the mix. De Bruyn and Navi Gerard Schutter had to settle for the 3rd spot in their redlined Revo, with a time of 10 minutes and 4 seconds, just 7 seconds off the time set by Hofstra and local lad Wade Harris in the redline VK50 machine. This clearly meant that Eben Besson and Leander Pape's Pienaar were the class of the field in the short qualifier, taking the win by 16 seconds and putting themselves in pole position for the remainder of the race. Not long after the completion of the short qualifying race, the crews once again lined up to tackle the first of the 3 loops that would make up the rest of the race. Loop 1 was just over 30 kilometers in length and in close proximity to the Pekisa Freeway, but it was strewn with challenges like rocks, ditches and dongas, and even a bit of water for good measure. As far as the speed was concerned, Loop 1 was pretty much a repeat of the qualifying race from before, with Gerard and Nick's Heinlein bringing up the rear in the Redline VK56. There was little daylight between them and the older Nissan Navara VK50 of Max Schroeder and Ryan Bland, who ended the day in 6th position. Schroeder would have had his sights set on the Renault Dust of Johan and Sean van Staden, who finished the day 26 seconds in front of the German. Ahead of the van Stadens, yet another German. This time it's father Jürgen Schroeder, who along with Achim Bergmann set the 4th fastest time in Class T1 from behind the wheel of their Nissan Navara. So by now one could figure out that the top 3 were the same crews as the top 3 in qualifying, but not necessarily in the exact same order. Johan de Bruyn and Gerard Skitter had a busy morning with the Pretoria businessman flying into Welkom just minutes before the start. He showed great pace in Loop 1, but had no choice but to end the day's proceedings in 3rd in his Redline Revo. De Bruyn's title rivals is, of course, the Eben Bosson and Leander Pennard pairing and their Team Hilux Rally Raid Hilux. De Bruyn kept them in his sights as the Hilux stopped the day's clock just 31 seconds faster than his Redline rival. But the men of the moment were none other than the Dutch driver Ernst Hofstra, with Wade Harris reading the notes in the Redline VK50. The Dutchman must have felt at home on the flatlands of the Free State as he took the Class T1 lead with a margin of 23 seconds.
The day was good. It was a fast track, and yeah, I like the race, and it's going good with Wade, with navigation.
Confirmation of the Dutch driver's 23-second lead over the battle between title hopefuls Eben Bosson and Johan de Bruyn. The older Schroeder completed the day in 4th, ahead of the van Stadens, who rounded out the top 5. All that action was only from the Friday of the event. The sun dawned bright and early over the Free State, announcing the Saturday and final day of the Renergen 400. In store for the crews, 2 fast and furious loops of around 170 kilometers each. Dutch driver Ernst Hofstra was the star of the show on day 1, but his African dream did not materialize when the Dutchman was forced to retire from the race. It seems like Welkom was not that welcoming to the Europeans, as Max Schroeder suffered a similar fate when he too was forced to throw in the towel. This opened the door for the Heinlein brothers, Gerard and Nick's, to climb up into 5th spot in their Redline VK56, gaining valuable experience in the process. And what a welcome return to the top 4 for series stalwart Johan van Staden and his son Sean. They were doubtful starters following the crash before, but not only did the Renault Duster make it to the start line, they also claimed a 4th place finish in the process. All that remained for the Class T1 warriors at the Renergen 400 here in Welkom was the final battle for the coveted podium positions. The 3 protagonists were defending champions Eben Bosson and Leander Pennard, the remaining German in the form of Jürgen Schroeder, with Achim Bergmann reading the notes, and the Class T1 title hopeful Johan de Bruyn and Gerard Skitter in the Navi seat. The German drove well in his Nissan Navara, but had to settle for the final podium spot, as the pace for the title fight between Bosson and de Bruyn was hot. De Bruyn and Skitter had every intention to try and close the points gap to rivals Bosson and Pennard, but on this occasion, there was nothing the Redline Revo could do about the sheer pace of the Team Hilux Rally Raid Hilux of the defending champions. De Bruyn had no choice but to settle for 2nd, while Bosson romped to a victory, extending his points lead in the process. Bosson did indeed extend his points lead thanks to the win, but 2nd for de Bruyn means that this title fight will go all the way to the wire. Schroeder completed the podium positions ahead of the van Stadens and the Heinleins, who rounded out the top 5. And there it is, the taste of victory from the top step of the podium.
Unfortunately, we had a flat tire about 8Ks before the end, front right. Put us down a bit in the dust.
And onto Class T we go, where 4 competitors have managed to secure points so far in 2023. Hendrik Du Plessis was leading the charge over Skalkberger, but the Ford driver was not in Welkom this weekend, clearing the way for Berger to enjoy himself here in the Free State. And that's exactly what the Pretoria businessman did over the 2 days that made up the Renergen 400. Together with co-driver Henk Janssen van Vieren, the King Price Extreme team set off into the Free State fields not to fight for results, but to have fun and perhaps even try to beat some of the faster cars in higher classes. And that's exactly what they did. Big Skalk knows that you have to have a clean run to be fast. Here in Welkom, they did.
It was a nerve-wracking day, we needed to finish. for the championship to be determined on the last race, and kudos kop.
Next up, the open-wheel warriors of Class G of the SARC. These cars provide their drivers with the perfect opportunity to do real rally raid racing at a more affordable price. And as a result, competition between these guys are fierce, and the point standing is further evidence of this fact. After 5 rounds, just 12 championship points separated the top 3 crews. The Morsteds, with Father Vannon now doing the navigator duties, were in third on 122 points, just 3 points behind Glenn Turon. The man with a little bit of breathing space at the top was none other than Jeff Winnett in a minute. And as always, the gentleman only had good things to say.
The fun is in being competitive and being in amongst the top runners.
The Pirelli qualifier was a short and fast affair, with the majority of the crews only needing around 10 minutes to complete the part tarmac and part dirt racing route. So times between these guys were always going to be rather close. In fact, just 2 single seconds is all that separated the team in 4th, and the team who took the final podium spot in 3rd. The Motonetics racing outfit of former points leader Glenn Turon and Craig Galvin were the ones losing out on a provisional podium, as they were beaten to the line by the identical car of Ewald van Rensburg and Johan Schippers. This opened the way for the Morsteds and their Motonetics Can-Am Maverick to battle it out with Jeff Minnett and Rodney Berg in their hydro power equipment version of the Can-Am for the top spot. In the end, it wasn't so much of a battle, as Minnett won it in a time of 10 minutes and 50 seconds, a comfortable 31 seconds faster than the Morsteds. And that was only the beginning. Shortly after the Pirelli qualifying race, the crews once again lined up to tackle the first of the event's racing loops. And the results were very similar as with the qualifier, except that Turon and Galvin managed to turn the tables on Van Rensburg and Schippers. Turon improved his position to occupy 3rd overnight. And as expected, there were no drama for the 2 crews at the top of the standings, but the gap got tight in the end, laying the foundation for an even bigger battle on the final day. Minnett's advantage of 31 seconds was reduced to just 16 seconds at the end of a tough and hot day in Welkom.
No, it was good. We got a puncher and we lost quite a lot of time, and then we were on the chase to catch up with Werner.
And here are the numbers. 15 seconds now the gap between Minnett and the chasing Morsteds, with Turon rounding out the provisional podium. This was it, the start of the second day of the penultimate race in the 2023 title fight. More than 300 kilometers split into 2 loops still had to be covered by these side-by-side machines. Championship points leaders Minnett and Berg had everything to gain, but everything to lose at the same time. While the chasing pack really had no option but to go for broke. Sometimes this works out and sometimes it doesn't, and on this occasion it didn't work out for Van Rensburg and Schippers, who had to retire on the day. Title hopefuls Glenn Turon and Craig Galvin gave it a good go in an effort to close the points gap to Minnett, but they had no answer and were forced to settle for the points that came with a 3rd place finish. So this left Minnett and Berg to battle it out with the Mostert family, and what a battle it was. Minnett's lead of just 15 seconds slowly evaporated as they were reeled in by the Mosterts. With 1 loop to go, the Mosterts took the lead and then even managed to open up a small gap. The winning margin at the end of 400 kilometers of racing? Just 52 seconds. And that's all you need to win a race. The Mosterts came out on top, while a 2nd place finish does Minnett's championship aspirations no harm at all. Turon had to settle for 3rd. Minnett was as graceful in defeat as he normally is in victory, while the father and son Van and Ian Mostert returned to the top step of the podium.
No, we had a good run. We battled a little bit with heating problems in the car, so we had to back off every now and then, but I'm also very surprised that we're on the top step, to be honest.
And to the big wheel and big engine special vehicle category we go. In recent times, this territory belonged to Tim Howes and navigator Gary Campbell, who epitomizes the term gentleman racers.
Going to do the same as we do every race. We're just going to go out there, have some fun, don't make any mistakes.
Howes' main title rival John Thompson did not come to Welkom, so the Italian looked sure to wrap things up here in the town. Howes and Campbell's main challenge here in Welkom would come from the popular Macanetti brothers Keith and Andrew in their That Macmobile. But after the short qualifying race, it was the name of Howes who topped the standings ahead of the Macanettis. When the flag dropped to signal the start of the first of the racing loops, Howes put the hammer down and extended his lead to stop the clock with a lead of 5 minutes and 7 seconds. Both Howes and Macanetti clearly enjoyed their time behind the wheels of these big and powerful monsters as they tackled the 340 kilometers that made up the route on the Saturday of the race, throwing these cars around with great finesse. the end, the house show continued with an easy victory over the Macanettes, who were definitely not unhappy about being on the Class A podium once again. Behind the two Class A special vehicles, two Class P cars also pitched up in Welkom. Quinton Lessing and Patrick Doden held the early advantage in their Century CRT over the Zarco driven by Grant Watkins and Mark Irvine. But sadly for both crews, neither of them managed to reach the finish. And this is what it looked like when Housen, Campbell and Keith and Andrew Macanetti sprayed the champagne from the Class A podium.
Thanks to Gary, he was fantastic, on point on the notes all the time, and really just good fun to be in the car with him.
Those were the highlights from all the battles in the various classes of the SARRC at the Renergen 400. And now it was time to settle the overall war of South Africa's premier class, Class T1+. Class T1+ is where you'll find cars and drivers that have even triumphed at the world-famous Dakar Rally. It's also where you'll find the ongoing battle between the boys in blue and the red team, Ford versus Toyota. With just 2 rounds in this year's title fight to go, it was advantage to Toyota Gazoo Racing's Henk Lategan, who held a slender 3-point advantage over NWM Ford Castrol's Gareth Woolridge. It was extremely close between the top 4, with defending champion Janelle de Villiers just a further 5 points back, and in turn only a mere 5 points ahead of his teammate Guy Bartrell. We caught up with points leader Henk Lategan before the start of the race.
Usually there's 1 or 2 guys battling for the championship. This year we got 4, which is, I think, is really good for the sport, really good for the spectators.
Ford driver Gareth Woolridge knew that a war was coming.
We've done some upgrades since the last race, which should hopefully help us here, especially in the heat. So we'll see what today and tomorrow bring, but hopefully we can keep fighting.
And as always, this guy was once again in the mix and in with a chance to fight for yet another motorsport title.
2 more rounds to go, so 5 points the first or the top 3, and then even I think the top 4 is within 9 points.
And what a welcome return to the sport for Century Racing's Brian Baragwanath. The team worked hard over the past few months to create this beautiful and new CR7 racing car, with the hopes of reigning on the Ford and Toyota parade.
Car looks good, let's hope it performed as good as it looks. So far during testing it's been really good.
The scene was set, and for the penultimate time in 2023, it was once again time to go racing. The Pirelli qualifying race was a short and fast affair, as it took the winners just 9 minutes to complete the short route. Henk Lategan and Brett Cummings have won many qualifying races in the past, and after also setting the fastest time here, we're now able to add the Renergen 400 qualifying race to their long list of achievements. The initial results reflected the championship points table, with Gareth Woolridge the next fastest in the NWM Ford Castrol Ranger. It was a good qualifying session for the Ford squad, with Gareth's older brother Lance and Navi Kenny Gilbert setting the 3rd fastest time, ahead of a gaggle of Toyotas led by Guy Bartrell and Simon Vasey-Lyle, who set the 4th fastest time. Times were close at this end of the field, as only 1 second separated Bartrell from teammate de Villiers and Murphy, with the Renergen Toyota Hilux of Gary Bertholdt and Henry Cohn a further 5 seconds back. And a great debut for the newly built Century CR7 Class T1+ car in the hands of Brian Baragwanath and Leonard Kramer, who showed good pace early on. The Team Hilux Rally Raid squad of brothers Fouché and Batters Blickno continued to make a name for themselves with another good showing in qualifying, with a time that was 8 seconds quicker than TGRSA's young gun Sahud Variawa and Donnie Stassen. The privateer Ford Range in the hands of Vos Prinsloo and Andre Vermeulen rounded out the top 10 in qualifying. Normally this would have been it for the Friday, but the new format here in Welkom meant that the crews only had an hour or so before they had to put their helmets back on and strap themselves in for Loop 1 of the Renergen 400. And what a loop it was. Rally Raid racing used to be about managing speed to ensure one reaches the finish. Now it is a full-on sprint race over 400 kilometers in cars that are capable of breakneck speeds over extremely rough terrain. And there are 15 of these cars in the Premier class, so to occupy a position in the top 10 at any time is a real achievement. After the Friday's action, this is exactly where Vos Prinsloo and Andre Vermeulen found themselves after a solid drive in the privateer Ford Ranger. Just ahead of Prinsloo was the Hilux of Gary Bertholdt and Henry Cohn. Bertholdt had the extra pressure of carrying the event sponsor's name in his car for the Renergen 400, so the wily old fox drove sensibly to secure his spot in the top 10. And what an impact these two guys have made since joining the sport just over a year ago. The Team Hilux Rally Raid crew of Fouché and Batters Blickno is never far from the action, and one got the feeling that Welkom would not be any different. They were beaten to the end of Friday's proceedings by the brand new Century CR7 of Brian Baragwanath and Leonard Kramer. BB, as he is also known, made it very clear that the objective was to test the car's reliability first before its outright speed, and so far it was mission accomplished. TGRSA's Guy Bottrell was fresh from taking his maiden victory in the series on the previous round in Paris. For the Renergen 400, he had his regular co-driver Simon Vasey-Lyle back in the Navi seat, and were currently in 6th position. His TGRSA teammates Oud Variawa and Donnie Stassen completed the day in a fine 5th position, around 31 seconds ahead of Bottrell. The rise of this youngster, who only turned 18 a few months ago, has been remarkable to say the least, as he continues to mix it up with the big names of Rally Raid Racing. And few names are as big as the one of Janelle de Villiers. The multiple champion does not seem to slow down, and after the first day's action, de Villiers and his partner Dennis Murphy occupied the 4th position on the standings board. The gap to Variawa behind him was 20 seconds, while the Hilux crew was just 12 seconds behind the crew in 3rd. The crew consisted of Gareth Woolridge and Boyd Dre in the NWM Ford Castrol Ranger. In fact, both Fords were the meat in the Toyota sandwich, because the second Ford in the hands of Lance Woolridge and Kenny Gilbert was the next car up the road. It was a great showing by both Fords, who have done well to take the fight to Toyota in recent times, and on this occasion it was clearly their aim yet again. With 2 Fords being the meat in the Toyota sandwich, it meant that a Toyota Gazoo Racing Hilux was topping the standings after a rapid day 1 of racing here in Valcom. And it didn't take long to figure out that the team setting the pace was the crew of Henk Latekan and Brett Cummings. When Latekan is on the move, there are few drivers in the world that can keep up. And here is the proof, with Latekan's name at the top of the standings. His advantage over the first of the Woolridge brothers was 36 seconds. Gareth was in 3rd, followed by de Villiers and the youngster Variawa, who rounded out the top 5. We caught up with a few of the front runners after Friday's action.
It was not all clean, but no, happy to get through with no punches or no major issues.
It was really, really nice. It's reminded me a lot of the old Carnival City races. Lots of sort of natural hazards and then mining hazards to look out for as well.
This was it, the final day of the Renergen 400, and quite possibly a day that could prove to be instrumental in the overall outcome of the season. So let's count them down. Reaching the end in 10th place was the Redline Revo of Dutch duo Dave Klaassen and Tessa Ruth, who clearly enjoy each outing to South African shores. They were beaten to the line by the Farmers Meat Century CR6 of Louis Dupree and Junior Vardy. This was Dupree's first outing since swapping his old special vehicle for the CR6. He was beaten to the line by the Ford Ranger of Ermelo-based businessman Vos Prinsloo and experienced navigator Andre Vermeulen, who continued to go faster and faster with every outing in the new Ranger. And these two just never seemed to be far away from the action. Team Hilux Rally Raids Fischer and Bantus Blickner made a fast entry into the sport, and the adventure continued here in Valcom. And not even this little mishap could prevent them from reaching the finish. After landing back on its wheels, it was foot flat, and to a 7th place finish for the brothers from Witbank. And after having their fair share of bad luck in 2023, the Horn brothers from Malalan were happy to add another finish to their long list of achievements. The second of the team Rally Raid Hiluxes reached the end of the Renergen 400 in 6th position. If you offered Gary Berthold a top 5 finish on his sponsors event before the race, he would have taken it. And that's exactly where the Renergen Hilux finished this tough and demanding race. The Old Fox drove a clean race to beat the Horns to the line and record a 5th place finish, much to the delight of sponsors Renergen. We were nearing the business end of this race, with the 2 Fords taking the fight to no less than 4 TGRSA crews, and with a brand new Century Racing CR7 also thrown into the mix. Fords Lance Woolridge and Kenny Gilbert started the day in 2nd position with every intention to fight for a victory. But their charge ended when the Ranger struck a ditch that did irreparable damage to the suspension. A sad end to what would have been a great race. One man's pain is another man's gain, and the one who gained a position in the process was none other than the crew of Brian Baragwanath and Leonard Kramer. The Renergen 400 was meant to be a test session for the brand new CR7, and a successful one at that, as BB also collected some points for finishing in 4th place, a great debut for the car. So we had the 3 podium spots still available, but we still had 5 drivers all gunning for glory. Something had to give, and it did. Janelle de Villiers and Dennis Murphy were on track for a podium finish, but the TGRSA Hilux hit a ditch just a few kilometers from the end. The impact ripped through the suspension. The crew managed to limp home following a few roadside repairs, but they would not stand on the podium. It went from bad to worse for the TGRSA squad, when a similar fate befell Henk Ladekan and Brett Cummings. The championship points leaders hit the same ditch that took out Lance Woolridge early in the day, causing the car to roll head over heels and out of the event. The incident also resulted in an injury to Ladekan's shoulder, which will put him on the sidelines for the next few months. So, in one fell swoop, TGRSA lost 2 of its cars, but fortunately for them, they still had 2 left, as Sahut Variawa raced to a podium finish in only his 4th ever Rally Raid race. The youngster has talent in abundance and will be a force to be reckoned with in the not-too-distant future. And with both Ladekan and de Villiers not adding too many points here in Welkom, a second-place finish did wonders for Guy Bottrell's championship aspirations, who now moves into second place in the 2023 title chase, following a win on the round before to go with the second place here in Welkom. And finally, the men of the moment. After keeping their noses clean and staying out of trouble while being fast at the same time, NWM Ford Castrol's Gareth Woolridge and Boyd Dreyer raced an emphatic victory, their second of the season, also claiming victory in Botswana earlier this year. Confirmation of Woolridge's victory over Bottrell and Variawa at the Renergen 400 here in Welkom. The names of Ladekan, de Villiers and Lance Woolridge sadly did not appear on the final results, while 4th was a great finish for the new CR7 in the hands of Baragwanath and Bertholdt rounding up the top 5. This was the second last chance to spray the bubbly from the podium in 2023, and that's exactly what Gareth Woolridge and Boyd Dreyer did. This victory also places the Ford crew in pole position for the 2023 title fight, with just 1 round to go.
I must say I'm very chuffed. I came in after the prologue a little nervous. We were lying 3rd, so I'm glad we had the pace today. We pushed, we had a clean run. I think most of all Boyd and I enjoyed it. We felt in the groove. We had no issues whatsoever, and I think that was the name of the game today.
That was that for the Renergen 400 from the Pakisa Freeway in Welkom. Next up, the season finale, which will be a brand new race in the form of the Waterberg 400. The race will take place in Limpopo on the 10th and 11th of November and will provide the final battlefield where some scores will be settled. All the action from the Renergen 400 was brought to you by Pirelli Ford and Toyota.